a roguishness, as if the character that expressed itself in his first language was less thoroughly moralised than the public figure and even the family man. Welsh people were better, or maybe they just had better names. Ossian Ellis, the harpist. Caradoc Evans, the writer. William Matthias, the composer. Clough Williams Ellis, the architect of Portmeirion. Cuffin Williams, the painter, rhymes with puffin. Every sound was firmly enunciated by Welsh speakers, taken care of at both ends, launched and landed. Welsh tongues held on to every part of the word, even in the case of a straightforward place name like Bangor, separating the syllables, but somehow leaving the G on both sides of the chasm, rolling the final R. Bangor. Welsh speakers didn't positively give it two stressed syllables. They just couldn't bear to cheat either part of the emphasis that was its birthright. It was as if the natives, unable to defeat the Seisnake invader on his own appropriated turf, him with his second homes and his gleaming Range Rovers, became interior emigrants, finding a refuge in the living rock of the language, and clung to every craggy inch. Even when speaking English, Welsh speakers pronounce words lingeringly. Dad remembered a preacher from his youth whose version of the word phenomenon was like a four-gun salute. A cow in a field, he said, is not a phenomenon, and nor is the moon in the sky, but when the cow jumps over the moon, that is a phenomenon. In retirement, Dad could seem vague, because his attention tended to be de-centered. His hearing was very acute, and even his vision, despite alleged macular degeneration, could be disconcertingly sharp, picking out window cleaners at work on the far side of Gray's Inn Square when he wasn't near the window himself. He might comment on something on the radio that no one else was listening to, which could give an impression of disconnection. A couple of years earlier, when he'd been mildly feverish with a kidney infection, I'd slept in his room for a couple of nights so as to help with the management of the pee bottle in the long watches of the night. Once I was drifting off to sleep, with the World Service dimly on the radio in the background. The program was about mountain climbing. I was woken by his voice softly calling out to me, "Adam?" "Yes, Dad, what is it?" "Have you ever worn crampons?" If I hadn't made the connection with what was on the radio, I would have thought he was away with the fairies, not up on the peaks with the alpinists of the airwaves. It hadn't even seemed certain that he'd be able to take in the fact of Mum's death. His routine the morning after she had died was standard, with a carer arranged by the council helping him along the corridor to the bathroom, but from that moment on, the day's routine would be taken apart. I had the feeling, hearing the splash of water in the bathroom and the chatty coaxing, that he was being prepared for execution. I didn't know what I would do if at some point he asked, "Where's Sheila?" once he'd been told. Would I have to keep on breaking the news, or would it be better to come up with a story about her being out shopping, away on holiday even, and hope he wouldn't ask again? In fact, once he was installed in his bedroom chair and the carer had left, he took in the information fully and cleanly. He said, "Oh God," but then after a deep intake of breath, turned the exclamation into the beginning of a hymn, singing, "Our help in ages past, our hope in years to come." He wept, and I held his hand. He never lost sight of the fact of her death, never deluded himself. When weeks later I apologized for the fact that he'd been given no warning, he seemed surprised, as if it was the most natural thing in the world for his wife of 50 years to slip away without a word. Sheila had said that she didn't want him to know what was happening. I'd just finished telling her that her dying belonged to her and that she shouldn't consider anyone else's wishes, so I could hardly overrule this decision even though I disagreed with it. She said that she could cope with everything except the thought of his life without her, and so we kept him in the dark. They'd stopped sharing a bed when he came home after his stay in hospital with the kidney infection, and his lack of mobility meant that they wouldn't run into each other. They would each call out, "Good morning, darling," when the carer was helping him along the corridor to the bathroom.